Now here's a blast from the past. The Famicom version of the original Super Chinese was released almost exactly 3 years before this sequel. And in the time since then, Culture Brain has trickled out 3 Famicom games. The 2 Hiryu no Ken games, and Arabian Dream Scheherazade. So they weren't exactly making a diverse lineup. In fact, out of the 9 games that Culture Brain released for the Famicom, 2 of them were not Hiryu no Ken or Super Chinese games. The first Super Chinese game on the Famicom was actually published by Namco. It was a port of an arcade game where you had to beat up enemies in this weird offset view. I didn't like the game very much, but since it came out during the Famicom boom, it still sold quite a few copies. With Culture Brain taking on the game themselves, how do they expand on this concept? By turning it into a Dragon Quest-style RPG, of course. Although here you fight your random combats by playing short stages of Super Chinese. The story of the game is that one day while watching television, there's a broadcast by the Demon Corps who say that they have taken over Chinese land. Jack and Rue from the first Super Chinese game are instructed by their master to go out and get 7 magic bells that will stop the Demon Corps. Superficially, Super Chinese 2 is a lot like other RPGs we've seen. We can pop into town where we'll buy equipment, and you converse with people by opening up a menu and hitting talk. And naturally from that same menu you can check out your inventory, what equipment you have, and your current status. Where Super Chinese 2 departs from the formula is when you get into a random encounter. You're first told what type of monsters you're fighting, and they're given a rough level equivalent, though I was taking out level 6 encounters at level 3 with no problem. You decide if you want to fight or run away, and assuming you want to fight, you go into an action scene that's very similar to the original Super Chinese. Here you just have to beat up a certain number of enemies and then the combat ends. Your opponents spawn infinitely, so you don't need to worry about chasing particular ones down. Initially, the A button punches and the B button jumps. However, as you progress through the game, you can unlock additional abilities like throwing fireballs. If you're not moving and you hit jump, you go straight up, but if you are moving, then you execute a somersault kick, and that'll take out anyone you land on. It's your most effective attack initially. Punching rocks can reveal pickups. Collecting the yen symbols unlocks invincibility power-ups. You have to manage to collect 6 of those without collecting a skull icon. The skull icon is randomly inside the same thing as the yen symbol, so it's really raw luck on whether or not you can do this. The treasure chests contain the more important thing. These are attack power-ups that are used with abilities that you've unlocked. The K's give you a flying jump kick that you do by hitting jump and then pressing in a direction, while the T and G's are used for your fireballs. The T gives you more ammunition, while the G just lets you fire the shots. There's also environmental hazards on some of these battles. Falling into water will take away half your health, and on some of them, lightning will randomly shoot out from the side to do massive damage to you. On the stages that have the skull motif, this giant guy will come out from time to time. He can't be hurt by punching or kicking, so you'll have to find some kind of upgrade to deal with him. Otherwise, you have to run around and avoid him. You can also hit the start button to bring up a menu at any point, and here you can either switch your equipment, for example, if you want to go to a sword, or you could use some of your items. After the battle's over, you get your experience in cash, and one nice thing in Super Chinese 2 is that there isn't a lot of grinding required. When you start out, it only takes 2 combats to level up. And the game doesn't seem to throw a whole lot of random encounters at you, although I did have a few occasions where I kept getting them one after another. Story events may put you into a series of these battle arenas. Once you defeat enough enemies, you'll be able to exit through the door at the top of the screen. And you might encounter bosses during these fights. This first boss turns you into a slime for a few moments when you get hit by his shots. You can deflect some of those shots by punching them, assuming you have the correct item. These action scenes have a lot of the same problems that the original Super Chinese did. Primarily, this comes down to the perspective being terrible, so it's really hard to tell where your attacks are going to hit, or if you're going to get hit. It's especially bad with a somersault kick, where doing it vertically doesn't have the same distance as doing it horizontally. And then there's how you get abilities. This is the worst part of Super Chinese 2. You get new abilities by finding masters and having them train you. And that training consists of running a track and field style course, where you have to destroy a certain number of balloons. It helps to use the ability you just got, but it's not required. Also, the other player on the bottom half of the screen isn't really affecting you. If you make it to the end of the course and you destroy enough balloons, then you successfully upgrade. The thing is, the way that you move in this segment is to point in a direction and mash the A button. The A button is also used to attack the balloons. If you're pushing in a direction and mashing A, sometimes it won't register the B button, which can also be used to attack the balloons. And you also have to use the B button to jump over obstacles. You also can't change direction without coming to a complete stop, and you accelerate extremely slowly. It makes these segments incredibly frustrating to play. For some reason, from the main menu you can select to play these as mini-games, but I don't know why you would do that to yourself. The neatest thing in Super Chinese 2 is how it's a two-player RPG. Both players control their characters independently while wandering the overworld, although either can initiate a transition. And in the combat scenes, both players are fighting at the same time. I gotta say, bits and pieces of Super Chinese 2 sound good. A co-op RPG where combat is a mini arcade stage? That sounds great, until the arcade stage is a version of Super Chinese. In Japan, Super Chinese 2 brings out some mixed emotions. A lot of people like the goofy style of the game and how it throws in strange things all the time. Like here, after you overeat at a reward feast, you have to run in place until you lose the weight. But the actual meat of the game isn't that great. There's a lot of good ideas here, but not a lot of good execution.